Americans traditionally love to fight. All real Americans love the sting of battle.
In the 1970s, your father watched George C. Scott own that screen. But here's what they never told you. That opening speech? Studios fought to destroy it. He became so consumed, he terrified his own crew. John Wayne refused to touch this role. Patton's family tried to kill the film, and the truth they buried, Patton, 1970, was made under a fascist dictator's regime. The secrets behind this legend are darker than any war scene you ever saw. Number 1. When the real general walked on set and scared everyone. In an era when World War II veterans ran America's corporations and government, one living legend arrived on the Patton set, General Omar Bradley himself. Bradley had served alongside Patton, witnessed his genius and madness firsthand, and survived to see peacetime. Now he watched actor Karl Malden try to portray him. Bradley wasn't just a consultant, he was a living test of authenticity. Malden studied the general's every gesture, speech pattern, and mannerism. The pressure was immense. How do you play someone who's standing 10 feet away, watching your every move? Bradley corrected script details and ensured his portrayal showed strength, not weakness. He'd spent decades in Patton's shadow and refused to be depicted as merely the cautious sidekick. Malden later admitted the experience was terrifying but invaluable. Bradley's presence grounded the film in reality. This wasn't just Hollywood imagination. It was history being recreated under the eyes of someone who lived it. His guidance gave Malden's performance unexpected depth and dignity. It balanced Scott's volcanic intensity with quiet authority. But while Malden had Bradley's guidance, Scott was undergoing a transformation that shocked everyone who witnessed it. Number 2. Franco's Deal. How a dictator helped make an American classic. In 1969, as Woodstock defined a generation, and Americans protested the Vietnam War, Hollywood made a deal with fascist Spain. Most of Patton was filmed in Spain under Francisco Franco's authoritarian regime. The landscape stood in for France, Germany, and North Africa. Spain offered something Hollywood desperately needed: cheap labor and military equipment. Franco's government provided soldiers as extras and allowed the Spanish army to supply authentic tanks, planes, and weapons. This saved millions of dollars in production costs. But it came with a price. The crew worked under censorship and had to avoid any political statements. The irony was that an American film about defeating fascism in World War II was being made with a fascist government's cooperation. Yet the results looked incredibly authentic. Audiences believed they were watching European battlefields. Most never realized everything was filmed in Spain. The choice was purely practical, not artistic, but it gave the film an epic scale impossible to achieve elsewhere. Spain became an invisible star of the production. Without Franco's cooperation, Patton couldn't have been made. But authentic locations were only half the battle. They still needed the machines of war. Number 3. The Family War. When Patton's relatives fought to stop the film. In the early 1970s, when families gathered around console stereos playing The Carpenters, Patton's descendants were fighting a private war against Hollywood. They hated the film. I despised it. They believed it misrepresented their legendary relative as reckless, unstable, and cruel. They wanted the focus on his military brilliance, not his volcanic temper. The slapping incident especially enraged them. They felt it tarnished the general's honor and legacy. Producer Frank McCarthy, himself a former Pentagon official, defended every controversial choice. He argued that Patton's contradictions defined him. The film wasn't meant as worship. It was meant as truth. The family disagreed violently. They tried to influence the production, pressuring the studio to soften the portrayal. The studio refused. McCarthy knew that sanitizing Patton would destroy what made him fascinating. The film shaped public opinion forever. Most Americans now know Patton exclusively through George C. Scott's portrayal is brilliant, complex, and deeply flawed. The family's criticism never stopped, but history sided with the filmmakers. Sometimes the truth is more powerful than the legend. But to capture that truth on screen, they had to leave America entirely. Number 4. The night Patton conquered Hollywood's biggest stage. On April 15, 1971, when Johnny Carson ruled late-night television, and Americans debated Nixon's policies over dinner, The Academy Awards became The Patton Show. 7 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Screenplay, Editing, Sound, Art Direction. One of the most dominant Oscar nights of the era. Hollywood sat stunned as the film dominated every major category. Few movies in history had achieved such total victory. Coppola's once dismissed script was celebrated as genius. Scott's refusal of his Oscar made the night even more legendary. His empty seat spoke louder than any acceptance speech. The sweep secured the film's immortal legacy. It became one of cinema's most honored war films ever made. The Academy recognized its rare balance of spectacular action mixed with psychological depth. Its technical achievements set new standards. Cinematography that transported viewers to 1940s Europe. Sound design that made battles visceral. Art direction that recreated history. It set a new bar for war epics that few films have matched since. The sweep made it an instant classic. Awards solidified its place in history. But the film's influence extended far beyond Hollywood's gold statues. Number 5. The opening speech that studios wanted to delete forever. In 1970, when Richard Nixon was leading America through the Vietnam War, moviegoers settled into theater seats expecting another war picture. Instead, they witnessed George C. Scott standing before a massive American flag, delivering words so raw that studio executives wanted them cut entirely. The profanity shocked them. The harsh tone terrified them. They feared families would walk out. Director Franklin J. Schaffner refused to budge. Francis Ford Coppola, who wrote the script, fought alongside him. This wasn't Hollywood invention. The speech wasn't invented for Hollywood. It was assembled from Patton's real speeches, letters, and recorded remarks, shaped into one unforgettable monologue. Scott memorized every syllable with the precision of a general preparing for battle. He waited until the final moment to perform in full costume, channeling something primal. When the cameras rolled, crew members stood frozen. The energy was unlike anything they'd witnessed. Critics who previewed the film admitted it set a tone no war movie had dared before. It introduced Patton as larger than life, brilliant, and terrifying. The audience didn't walk out. They leaned forward. Audiences watching Patton during Vietnam couldn't avoid the comparison. Here was a general obsessed with victory at any cost, released into a country questioning whether any war was worth winning. But this iconic opening almost never happened, and the speech wasn't the only part of the film that nearly got destroyed. Number 6. The tank trick that fooled everyone except historians. In 1970, when muscle cars dominated American streets and men debated Chevy versus Ford, the Patton crew faced an impossible challenge finding World War II tanks. 25 years after the war ended, authentic German Panzers and American Shermans had been scrapped or rusted into oblivion. The production needed dozens of tanks for massive battle scenes. They turned to the Spanish Army, which offered M48 Patton tanks, ironically named after the general himself, but built in the 1950s, a decade after the war. The crew repainted them, modified their shapes, and transformed American post-war tanks into German Panzers. Military historians immediately noticed the deception. The tank treads were wrong. The turret designs didn't match. But general audiences never suspected a thing. The spectacle overwhelmed the inaccuracy. The massive tank battles looked real enough to transport viewers to 1940s Europe. This wasn't unique to Patton. Most 1960s and 70s war films used modern equipment, painted to look vintage. The Spanish Army's cooperation saved the production from collapse. It became one of cinema's largest tank displays, even if the tanks themselves were frauds. Sometimes the illusion matters more than the reality. But while fake tanks rolled across Spain, something very real was happening on set. Number 7. Why Francis Ford Coppola was pushed aside before The Godfather. Back in 1969, when men wore wide ties and Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, a young screenwriter named Francis Ford Coppola was struggling to make his mark in Hollywood. Fox executives grew hostile to Coppola's script and pushed him aside before filming began, stripping him of creative control. They hated his script. I called it too psychological, too complex. They wanted explosions and heroism, not introspection. Coppola's draft explored Patton's massive ego, his contradictions, his obsession with glory. The studio said it was unfilmable. They removed him from the project completely. Coppola never expected to see his name on screen, but producer Frank McCarthy believed in the script's depth. He fought to keep Coppola's credit. Years later, that unfilmable screenplay won an Academy Award. Ironically, Coppola wasn't even at the ceremony. He was already working on other projects, including what would become The Godfather. The studio executives who called his work worthless watched it triumph. History proved them catastrophically wrong. Coppola's words didn't just shape a war movie. They created a character study that changed cinema forever. But even with a brilliant script, they faced an impossible problem: finding someone brave enough to play Patton. Number 8. The star who said no, and the unlikely actor who changed his mind. In an era when Steve McQueen ruled the box office and John Wayne defined American masculinity, every major star in Hollywood turned down Patton. Burt Lancaster said no. Rod Steiger refused. Even the Duke himself, John Wayne, passed on the role. They feared being typecast. They worried about playing a controversial figure. George C. Scott initially rejected it too. He despised biographical roles and didn't want to be trapped playing one character forever. The studio panicked. Who could possibly embody America's most brilliant and brutal general? Then Scott made a decision that changed everything. He read Coppola's script one more time. He realized this wasn't just another war film. It was a deep study of obsession, genius, and self-destruction. But Scott had conditions. He refused to glorify Patton as a simple hero. He demanded the freedom to show the general's cruelty, his arrogance, his dangerous flaws. The studio, desperate and out of options, agreed. That decision created one of cinema's most unforgettable performances. Scott became forever linked with Patton, the role he once refused. But his rebellion against Hollywood was just beginning. Number 9. The Oscar he refused, and the message that shocked the world. On April 15, 1971, when color TVs were still a luxury in many American homes, the Academy Awards ceremony reached its pinnacle moment. And the winner is George C. Scott for Patton. The audience erupted in applause, but Scott's seat remained empty. He wasn't just absent. He had publicly announced he would reject the Oscar if he won. He called the ceremony a meat parade, a degrading competition between artists who shouldn't be ranked like cattle. Hollywood was stunned. No actor had ever refused a Best Actor Oscar before. Scott returned the statue. He wanted art, not trophies. His rebellion made international headlines and angered Hollywood's establishment. Some called him ungrateful. Others called him a hero. Scott didn't care about either opinion. At a time when Nixon projected strength from the White House, Patton felt uncomfortably familiar, a reminder of how thin the line can be between command and arrogance. In an era when men valued principles over popularity, he stood firm. The Oscar he refused became as legendary as the performance itself. It symbolized independence, artistic integrity, and a middle finger to the system. Decades later, his stand remains one of Hollywood's most iconic moments. But while Scott rejected Hollywood's crown, another battle was brewing. Patton's own family wanted the film destroyed. Number 10. The makeup that made veterans cry. In 1970, when men still wore fedoras to baseball games and shined their shoes every Sunday, the makeup team faced a crucial challenge, making George C. Scott look like Patton. Scott's natural features were completely different: softer, rounder, less severe. The team used prosthetics to reshape his jaw, creating Patton's distinctive square-edged profile. They studied photographs obsessively, copying every detail. Scott wore tailored uniforms identical to Patton's, down to the stitching. He carried ivory-handled pistols, not pearls, as Patton would sharply correct anyone who made that mistake. When the transformation was complete, something shocking happened. World War II veterans visiting the set stopped in their tracks. Some broke down crying. They said it felt like Patton himself had returned from the grave. The resemblance went beyond physical. Scott captured something in the eyes, the posture, the way Patton held himself above everyone else. The illusion was so complete that even Patton's family, despite hating the film, admitted the likeness was uncanny. The makeup became Scott's second skin. He didn't just wear Patton's face, he inhabited it completely. But the physical transformation was only the beginning of something far more disturbing. Number 11. The performance that terrified the entire film crew. Back when method acting was revolutionizing Hollywood, and actors like Brando transformed their craft. George C. Scott took it to frightening extremes. He stayed in character between takes, barked orders like a real general. Extras instinctively stood at attention when he walked by. Some forgot they were making a movie. His voice shook the set with volcanic authority. Director Franklin Schaffner encouraged the intensity and made scenes brutally authentic, but it created unbearable tension behind the camera. Crew members actively avoided Scott during filming. They whispered that he felt possessed by Patton's ghost. The line between actor and role had dissolved completely. Scott's method drained everyone around him, but it elevated his performance to legendary status. The fear was real. Many crew members later admitted they felt like they were serving General Patton himself, not watching an actor perform. This psychological pressure gave Scott an undeniable edge. His performance became unforgettable because it was terrifying. But Scott wasn't just channeling Patton's personality. He was risking his own health and sanity. And the real Patton, as it turned out, was even stranger than Scott's portrayal. Number 12. Patton's bizarre belief that even the movie couldn't fully show. In an era when Americans watched The Twilight Zone and debated UFOs, the real Patton believed something that would sound insane today. He claimed he'd lived multiple past lives as a soldier. He told people he'd fought as a Roman legionary centuries before. He spoke obsessively about destiny guiding his path. This wasn't a private belief. He discussed reincarnation openly, even with fellow officers. His confidence came from this mystical conviction that he was born to lead men in battle across different eras. But it made the army deeply uneasy. Even allies questioned his mental stability. Was this brilliant general also dangerously delusional? The film hints at this obsession through brief moments, but it never showed the full extent of Patton's spiritual beliefs. He saw omens everywhere. He believed fate had chosen him. This fearlessness made him unstoppable on the battlefield. If destiny guides you, why fear death? But it also made him reckless and impossible to control. The real Patton was stranger, more complex, and more mystically obsessed than any Hollywood film could capture. His belief in reincarnation gave him superhuman confidence, but that same confidence led to his most catastrophic mistake. Number 13. The slap that almost destroyed America's greatest general. In 1943, while American families rationed sugar and bought war bonds, Patton committed an act that nearly ended his career. The film shows him slapping one soldier, but in reality, it happened twice in Sicily. Both soldiers suffered from what we now call PTSD, but were then dismissed as battle fatigue. Patton accused them of cowardice. He struck them in front of their fellow soldiers, called them disgraceful. When the press exposed the scandal, America erupted in outrage. Mothers who'd sent their sons to war demanded Patton's removal. Eisenhower faced an impossible decision: reprimand a brilliant general or lose public support. He chose to keep Patton, but forced him to apologize. The Army couldn't afford to lose its most aggressive commander. The film simplifies the incident to one soldier, one slap. Even that shocked 1970 audiences who weren't accustomed to seeing American heroes portrayed as cruel. Producer Frank McCarthy insisted it be included. Sanitizing history would make the film worthless. The scene became one of the movie's defining moments. It showed Patton's genius came with terrible darkness. The controversy followed him until death. But from that darkness emerged an unexpected triumph. Number 14. The surprise hit nobody in Hollywood expected. In 1970, when Easy Rider had convinced studios that war movies were dead and young audiences only wanted counterculture rebellion, Patton opened with low expectations. Hollywood executives believed war films belonged to the past. The genre seemed exhausted, but audiences flocked to theaters. Patton arrived as America was splitting in two, young audiences rejecting authority, older generations clinging to it. The film forced both sides to confront what leadership really meant. Patton grossed over $60 million in North America, a massive sum when average ticket prices were under $2. It ranked among the year's biggest hits. The success stunned Hollywood and revived interest in World War II stories. George C. Scott's performance fascinated the public. The film's psychological complexity mixed perfectly with epic battle spectacle. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. The studio had completely underestimated its appeal. It became both a blockbuster and a prestige film, a rare combination. Newspapers debated whether Patton was a hero or a madman. Living rooms across America argued the same question. Viewers saw themselves and their fathers in this complicated man. The success reshaped war cinema. It proved audiences craved complexity, not simple heroism. They wanted flawed leaders, moral ambiguity, and honest portrayals. Patton delivered all three. But the biggest shock was still coming. An Academy Awards sweep nobody predicted. Number 15. The ending they changed, and the poetry that made it immortal. The real Patton died in a car accident in December 1945. A simple, unheroic end for America's most aggressive warrior. But the film doesn't show his death. Instead, it ends with Patton walking alone, reflecting on glory being fleeting. Ancient Roman generals, he explains, were followed by servants whispering, "All glory is fleeting," during victory parades. Director Schaffner wanted poetry, not tragedy. Some historians criticized the choice, claiming it softened reality, but audiences found it devastating. The ending became iconic, more powerful than any death scene could have been. It left viewers haunted. It made Patton timeless. The final image, a small figure walking away from the camera, his dog Willie beside him, spoke of destiny, mortality, and the loneliness of greatness. It felt bigger than history. It elevated the film from war movie to myth. The choice shaped its entire legacy. It ended not with death, but with meaning. And that dog, Willie, became the film's secret weapon. A bull terrier who showed audiences that even the hardest general had a soft heart. That small detail reminded everyone that Patton was human. Even warriors love their dogs. Outro. So there you have it. The shocking movie facts behind Patton 1970 that changed classic war movies forever. George C. Scott Patton wasn't just performing, he was possessed. That Patton opening speech almost vanished. The George C. Scott Oscar refusal made history. From General George Patton's real bizarre beliefs to filming under a fascist dictator during Nixon-era America, this Patton movie history proves the best war films ever made hide the darkest secrets. If you remember watching these classic Hollywood films with your father, when historical war movies and military movies based on true stories actually mattered, hit that like button. Tell me in the comments which 1970s American cinema legend you want exposed next. Subscribe, because next week we're revealing what Hollywood buried behind The Godfather. You won't believe it.